Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite finesse fishing techniques for up here in the Northeast, but it'll work on any grass lake or other types of lakes as well. It's an excellent largemouth finesse fishing technique. I use it in places that I've thrown drop shots, shaky heads, even Senkos. It catches a ton of fish. I've caught fish around docks and other places, grass, big flats, points, all kinds of places that you can think of. It's just an excellent technique to catch a ton of bass, and having thrown it for a while, I've learned a couple little tricks on how to rig the Neko rig up to catch a ton more fish than just your standard setup that you would do. So we're gonna go through a few things that I like to do to my Neko rig here to save money, catch you more fish. So stay tuned and let's get right into it. So as I mentioned, the Neko rig is an excellent way to catch a ton of largemouth bass. It would work for smallmouth as well, but the way we're gonna rig it up today is the way that I like to rig it for largemouth bass. This is an excellent way to fish around docks. I've done it a ton around docks, especially some deeper docks where a wacky rig Senko might not get down to the bottom fast enough. You can fish this bait. We'll show you a trick on how to catch more fish doing it around docks. We've been using it around grass flats, a lot of places like Cayuga and stuff like that, where you're usually fishing a drop shot out on those grass edges. You can throw the Neko rig and get a little bit different presentation and catch fish that way as well. It's just a little bit different look than what everybody else is doing. So we're gonna run through everything I like to do here. There are a couple pieces that I will mention today that I am missing. I've run out of them and I'm having a hard time finding them online and getting some more. I will mention a couple things that will look different than what's actually on my rig here, but this will work as well if you rig it up the same way that we're gonna talk about in today's video. The first thing we're gonna talk about is actually our rod and reel. We're gonna go really simple with this just because you do need a rod and reel to fish it, but you don't need anything too fancy. I just want to show you the setup that I like to use. This right here is a custom built rod. I built it myself. If you'd like to see some videos on how to build these rods, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I've never done a video on it previously, but I fish a lot of my own custom rods and I'm thinking about potentially getting into it even more, showing you how versatile custom rods can be, and kind of designing my own rods and showing you what the benefits of doing it is. This is just a 7-foot medium fast action. Basically, any medium action spinning rod will work. It's an 1/8 to a 1/2 ounce lure weight, 6 to 12 pound test. That's your basic spinning rod. Pretty much any spinning rod you find in stores will do this right here. All I like to look for in my Neko rig rod, a little bit of a soft tip so I can drag it and feel if it's grass, rock, whatever, but still have some backbone here to be able to set the hook and get through those fish, especially if you're using the weedless hook, which we're going to talk about in a little bit here. The weedless hook, you'll need a little bit more backbone. You could even go to a medium heavy if you really want to set the hook, but I like the medium just a little bit more. And then for a reel, I just have a 2500 size Shimano Sedona, super basic reel. This is probably one of the best budget spinning reels ever made. Very cheap, but works excellent. And 2500 size is like the best size for bass. And then I have a bunch of 15-pound braid in lime green here. This is Suffix 832. The lime green braid down to a fluorocarbon leader. You guys know I love to do that. It just allows you to see that bait better. You can literally see on a calm day if your line's laying on the water, if a fish has picked that bait up, and you're gonna land more fish because of that braid. So out of all of this equipment right here, the most important thing if you're gonna do one thing is probably the braid. Any other spinning combo will work. Put that lime green braid on there and you will catch more fish than if you did anything else to the spinning combo here. So let's jump into the Neko rig and talk about the actual equipment. So for starters with a Neko rig, the first thing you're gonna need is a worm. There is one that I really like better than the rest. It is not because I'm sponsored by 6th Sense either. This is truly the best worm that I've found for fishing a Neko rig, and I'm going to explain why. Not saying your trick worms won't work. I've used them, they work. Your finesse worms, if you want a smaller profile, zoom finesse worm, that will work as well. You can pretty much put anything on a Neko rig. You can put a Senko on a Neko rig. There's a reason why this one works better than the rest, and I'm going to show you right now. So this is the Divine Shaky Worm, the 6.3 inch. It's the same size as a trick worm, but it has a few different things than a trick worm that will work better. The first thing is a trick worm is pretty much the same profile the entire way through. So you will get that tail quivering action when it's on the bottom and it's standing up a little bit, but it won't be as severe as this one. This one has a bulbous tail on the end and it has a very thin tail leading up to that bulbous end. So when you're dragging this on the bottom, it's going to have a lot more action than your traditional trick worm. Like I said, trick worm will work. I've used it a ton and it does work. There's a few things that I do to it to make it work better. You don't have to do that to these worms right here. And this is the one key component of this bait right here. The worm head is super fat, but it's very flush the way that they mold these. So when you're putting a nail weight in here, as opposed to a trick worm where it's very skinny at the head and then it kind of rounds out a little bit, it makes it harder to get that nail weight in there, especially if you're using some of the longer ones. This one will go right in the head perfectly, and it has enough meat in the head to actually get that nail weight in there, stuck in properly, and it won't rip through the sides or kink the head or anything like that. So it's going to give you a much better action. That fatter head profile also allows me to put a hook in here much better and keep it on a lot better. So it comes in a bunch of colors as well. It works just like a trick worm. Like I said, it's probably, you can use a trick worm, you can use any finesse worm that you really like. You can use a robo worm, you could use anything on a Neko rig. This is just my favorite, and like I said, not because I'm sponsored, they do really work. Those key features help me catch more fish. I've noticed it when using this bait. So comes in a bunch of colors. I keep it really simple with my Neko rig colors. I have Cosmic Black here, which is just black if I'm fishing some darker water. June Bug would work as well. Dark Water Bug, all those colors are really good. Green Pumpkin for some clearer water, or any watermelon colors. If I'm fishing clearer water, that's a really good one. If you want a good all-around color, this is one of my favorite colors from 6th Sense. If you want a color to just get out there and fish, Nirvana, it's black and blue on one side, green pumpkin on the other. If you don't know what color to throw, that's one of my favorites. It just will work flat out. And then Melon Dawn. If you know, I love to fish morning dawn worms up here in the Northeast. For some reason, they love that pink color. So this Melon Dawn has a watermelon back and a pink belly. It's the morning dawn color on the belly. It's an excellent color. This catches a ton of fish. It's a super awesome color for up here in the Northeast. I'm sure it'll work other places in the country as well. So a couple other key things that you're going to need for your Neko rig here. You need a Neko hook. You can use pretty much whatever you want. There's two that I really like, and this is going to be the VMC Finesse Neko hook that I have on here right now. That one is the one that I like to go with when I'm fishing some sparser cover, maybe around docks, maybe some big sand flats with just a little bit of grass, or a rock flat, something like that. I will go without the weed guard to make sure I land more fish. I will use the VMC weedless Neko hook if I'm fishing around grass and a lot of it. This is a very weedless technique as well, especially because a lot of times if you fish ponds, they have that green slime on the bottom. Your hook is actually elevated above the bottom, so the weight is going to drag through the green slime, but there's nothing to catch there. If you throw a Texas rig, that weight will catch in the green slime on the bottom and get all covered up on the bait. That's not going to happen with a Neko rig. Your hook's going to be suspended up above that slime, and you can drag this along the bottom, and it won't get any slime on there. So that's an excellent thing to do, and then in that case, I would be using the weedless Neko hook. So anytime I'm around grass, that's when I'm going to use that. It's an extremely weedless bait. This piece right here is the O-ring. I can use just a standard O-ring. I've done it many times. What I prefer is the VMC crossover ring. I don't have any right now. I'm out and they're very hard to find. So if you just have the O-rings, it will work just fine. When we talk about rigging here in just a second, I'll show you a trick with this O-ring to make sure you can keep a couple more fish on one bait. The last thing you're going to need is a nail weight. Again, there's another one that I really like. I don't have any right now. It's the Half Moon one from VMC, where it has the fat head. It looks like a Ned rig head, but with a nail on the end. That one works really well, especially if you're fishing around rocks. I like to put that one in so that the weight sticks out and you can feel the rocks a little bit better because the weight is making direct contact with the bottom. If I'm fishing in grass, like I talked about, you might get that green slime on the bottom. That's when I'm going to go with this nail weight style, just a straight VMC nail weight, because I can put this all the way up inside the head and there's nothing to catch on the bottom. So I like to have both, depends on your scenario. Today we're just going to be showing you with this nail weight here. These come in a ton of sizes as well. My favorite is like the 16th to the 3/32 size. I have some 1/8, I have some 1/32. Just depends on what type of water you're fishing. If you're fishing a pond that's 2 foot deep and has green moss on the bottom, I'd go with a 1/32 ounce. You don't need a lot of weight to get it down there, and the more weight you have, the more it's going to get buried in the dirt. If you're fishing a lake that's 15 foot deep and you're fishing a grass edge, you might need the 1/8 ounce to get down there, maybe if the wind's blowing a little bit. So use the conditions to be your judge. That's the way that I keep a bunch of different size nail weights with me. They're pretty cheap and you can just change them on the fly. So let's rig this thing up. We'll show you how to get this ready to go fish, and hopefully you'll be catching a bunch more fish on a Neko rig in no time. All right, so the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna take a worm out of your pack, basic. If you want to get any of these 6th Sense worms and wanna support the channel, if you use my code Quince on the website, you'll save 10% off your whole order. It'll help me out a ton. They're great worms and you'll catch a ton of fish. What you're gonna do is you're gonna take this O-ring that we talked about. It's better if you have the tool or a pair of pliers to stretch it over these worms, I've noticed. I left mine in my boat and it's all covered up, so I'm not gonna go dig that out right now. It's hard, with this being so fat up front, you can't even get an O-ring over this. The only way I found to get an O-ring over it, if you don't have a tool, is to go over the tail. So we're just gonna run this O-ring right over the tail here. And the key with placement of your O-ring on a Neko rig is putting it about 3/4 of the way up the worm. You don't want it right dead center because you're going to add weight. So when you put it 3/4 of the way up, when you pull your line tight, it'll stand the worm up rather than cause it to fall over. So you want it about 3/4 of the way up. That's right where you want it. Maybe back just a little bit more. It's somewhere right in the 3/4 to half area, right in there is what you're looking for. Also depends on what size weight you're using. If you're using a 1/8, you're going to want to move it up a little bit further. If you're using a 1/32, you can move it back a little bit further because it doesn't have as much weight. Then you're going to take your hook, which will be tied to your leader on your rod, and instead of just going directly under the O-ring and barely hooking any plastic like that, you're going to rip a ton of plastics doing that, and it's not going to stay on as well. The VMC crossover ring, that's when you'll actually just hook through the crossover ring, and it's a little bit better. It has more support on the worm. But if you just have this one contact point with this O-ring and you have it just hooked under the O-ring, when you set the hook, it's just going to rip the worm right in half. If you come maybe a 1/4 inch in front of the O-ring and go down into the meat of the plastic, like halfway down, and then come out like a 1/4 inch behind, you'll see that that hook is much more stable and it'll control the worm a little bit better. You'll also rip less worms by doing this. You might get 1, maybe 2 more fish doing this. Like I said, the crossover ring's the way to go, but that right there will land you a few more fish and keep your worms on the hook a little bit longer. The last thing when you come to a Neko rig, very simple, is putting the nail weight in, but this is where most of the mistakes can happen, and this is where one of my biggest tricks comes to land a lot more fish and keep them in the bait longer. So the number one thing, if you skip your bait under a dock and you smack the side of the dock, a lot of times your nail weight's going to fly out of that bait, or you're going to hook a fish that's shaking the worm and your nail weight flies out. You keep losing a bunch of nail weights and don't know why. First thing we're going to do is we're going to come straight in. There's an actual like recess in the head of the worm here, so you can center it up perfectly. We're going to push it right in and keep it as centered as possible the whole way down through the head of this worm. And what most people do, they're going to put this in and they're going to shove it all the way inside the head of the worm and just cover it up inside there. While that works, that's how you want it rigged. It's straight, it's inside the head. That's going to fly right out of this bait, no problem. You're going to lose a bunch of nail weights doing that. So what I'll do is I'll pull out maybe a 1/4 inch right before I'm done putting it in. I won't push it in and pull it back out, but I'll put it just about to the end here. I will take a drop of this super glue, Loctite gel super glue. I've used it for a bunch of other videos as well. I will put a drop right on the nail weight there. I'll kind of pull the plastic back, put a drop on there, and then I will shove the nail weight the rest of the way in the head with the super glue, and it will stay in there as long as this worm is on your hook until you bust open the plastic here that will expose the nail weight again. If you got that glued, as long as you have the worm, you're going to have your nail weight. It's going to stay on so much longer. You're going to waste less money on nail weights, and you're going to catch more fish. You're not going to make bad casts or skip it near a dock and the nail weight flies out and you got to reel it back in and rig up again. It's going to save you time, money, and catch you more fish. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you want to see a video talking about one of my favorite smallmouth techniques and how to rig it up, go ahead and check this video out right here. Leave a like down below and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of my fishing videos coming